Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show will now begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Nessa Il-Tibi, Senior Anchor, Al Arabiya.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, good morning, I guess that's me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our hydrogen panel. After decades of repeated attempts, hydrogen as an energy source, or rather an energy carrier, never really reached that liftoff point that some have predicted in the past. Despite that, hydrogen remains an essential gas feedstock. It's used in crude oil processing, it's used in making methanol for plastics, it's used in producing ammonia for fertilizers. That's the main ingredient there. But with climate change topping the world's agenda, the long-awaited energy moment for hydrogen might be dawning upon us. Lest we forget, the gas burns cleanly, producing water and no CO2 emissions. But hydrogen's energy moment will only materialize if the world produces hydrogen in a climate-neutral way. That means either by capturing the associated carbon emissions if we're producing it from fossil fuels, or by generating it from renewable energy sources. And for this energy moment to happen at speed and with a competitive cost structure, the industry and the technology need to build up and scale up massively. But what are the obstacles that could hinder the viability of clean hydrogen at scale? What sectors of the hydrogen supply chain need the most investment? And what incentives are necessary to ensure widespread commercialization? Is hydrogen, ladies and gentlemen, the fuel of the future and always will be, as the saying goes? Or has that future finally arrived? I'm very happy to host the esteemed panel here with me to discuss this further. Mr. Ahmed Al-Khwaiter is the Chief Technology Officer at Saudi Aramco, and Dr. Samir Sarhan is the Chief Operating Officer of Air Products, and Mr. Sharif Foda, the Chairman and CEO of the National Energy Services Reunited NISR. Very difficult name, probably NISR is a much shorter abbreviation. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Ahmed. Back in 2018, at the FII, on stage, the Saudi energy minister at the time told me that Saudi Arabia is planning to become a global player in LNG. Okay? Now it seems that Aramco's leapfrogging LNG and delving straight into hydrogen. What is the strategic reason behind this? What does Aramco see in hydrogen's outlook that it doesn't see in LNG's?
So as you know, today the world has really moved a long way since 2018. The ambitions, the global ambitions to achieve lower carbon footprint energy have, I believe, multiplied and gone to a much higher level. We have seen commitments by many countries to try to decarbonize their economies and decarbonize their energy systems and lower the carbon footprint. And if we are trying to go to zero globally then there is no way around hydrogen. Hydrogen is your only option in many of the hard to decarbonize sectors to basically drop in to allow that decarbonization. So the environment has changed. The demand and the supply, especially the demand outlook, has changed since 2018. We see IEA has now projected upwards of 38 million barrels of oil equivalent hydrogen demand in 2050, which makes hydrogen a major component of the energy system, the primary energy system. So I believe that that's the main driver that has made hydrogen really seem to be the best option going forward. It's that ambition, I would say, of global ambition to achieve net zero. And I would say also the technology maturity of renewables, and the technology maturity of use of hydrogen in the form of fuel cells, all have come together to create an opportunity that it really is one of the best opportunities to create low carbon energy.
And we're going to talk about carbon capture, because that's also a very crucial technology for clean hydrogen in the future. Dr. Serhan, hydrogen seems like the new buzzword. It's being talked up as the fuel of the future. Air Products is betting heavily on that outlook. But hydrogen has been here before, full of promise, never really takes off. What's different this time around for hydrogen, and where do you see its future applications?
When it comes to hydrogen, that means Air Products, really, we have a history of 40 years in this. We were the first to supply NASA hydrogen for fuel for the Space Shuttle program. We are the biggest hydrogen producer in the world with around 9,000 tons per day. So it's part of our DNA. And we are using all of this capability now to transition to low carbon hydrogen. We see significant demand there. We see it as a low carbon for fuel for heavy vehicles like trucks, buses, trains, airplanes. We see applications in refining. We see applications chemical, petrochemical, steel industry. It's real. We really see the energy, the momentum developing all over the world.
Of course, and you're also in the green energy, green plant in NEOM, which we're going to be talking about later. Yeah. Mr. Sharif, you're an oil field service guy, and Nisr is an oil field service company. Where do you fit in that value chain for hydrogen?
So thank you, Nasser. First of all, I'm very honored to be here in the FII, and it's always a pleasure to be here. And as you've seen this week, has been really a great announcement and show really the leadership of Saudi Arabia. And at the same time, in January, we actually launched our ESG impact segment. And the purpose of that is to provide technologies to enable the energy sector to produce oil and gas in a friendlier manner, or energy in a friendlier manner. So what does that do with hydrogen now? Is actually the biggest role of the OFS is definitely on the carbon capture and storage. Because if you have seen today, majority of the hydrogen produced today, more than 95% is actually gray hydrogen. It does not have any impact on climate change. It has to be either blue or green. And definitely the role here is on emission, and actually methane and monitoring how to capture the carbon during even the energy and during the hydrogen production. In the same time, I think we can play a big role actually on the green hydrogen, especially on capturing that waste of energy that happens in a lot of our operation and the infrastructure from flaring, for example. A lot of countries actually in the region, to be able to produce the oil, they flare gas, and this is waste. Beside the fact that it's obviously the carbon footprint. The carbon footprint of our operation as well, how to lower that carbon footprint, to be able to do that, which is actually enable all the carbon capture, because at the end of the day, we have to be pragmatic to know how we use our current infrastructure of the region to be able to produce any other sort of energy.
And we're going to be talking more about that. But Mr. Ahmed Al-Khwaiter, moving on from Sharif's point there on carbon capture, you guys have some experience with this technology, capturing the CO2 at the Hawiyah gas plant, piping it to Uthmaniyah for enhanced oil recovery there. Is Aramco ready to scale up things with carbon capture? Is the technology ready to be scaled up? And more importantly, at what price tag?
So yes, definitely we are ready. I believe that the technology has proven itself over many years. The question of technology feasibility is not there. The technology is at scale today. 37 million to 40 million tons of CO2 are injected today globally into geological formations and safely. And so that technology is mature and ready to go. We have been operating our own pilot, 800,000 tons a year capacity for the last 6 years. No problems, no challenges. So I really do believe the technology is mature. The cost structures are very compatible with I think the competitive energy costs that are needed for hydrogen. So it really does allow, for example, low carbon hydrogen to be produced today at scale with very competitive costs.
What are we talking about? $2 per kilogram, or?
At the location of production, we're talking about in the range of $1.5 a kilogram for low carbon hydrogen at the point of production. The challenge with hydrogen is transport. So the big challenge is converting it to something that can be transported or compressing it and transported. There's some cost associated with that. But at point of production, we're talking in the $1.5 to $2 a kilogram range, which is far below alternatives for now. As the alternatives have to scale up, it will take some time before they get competitive.
Dr. Serhan, Air Products is leveraging its industrial gases expertise. You've talked about 40 years of hydrogen production, but you want to become a vertically integrated clean hydrogen player. What sectors of the hydrogen supply chain do you see that needs the most investment?
I think, as Ahmed mentioned, it's really creating that infrastructure to distribute the product. I mean, this is really where we also need policymakers to help in that, to have that infrastructure. The vehicles to basically be able to run, like having trucks that can run on a hydrogen fuel cell. So these are the limitations we see right now that mean to really go massive scale.
Sharif, hydrogen sulfide, just to let people know here, it's a colorless gas known for its pungent rotten egg smell. Some of you have probably encountered it at visits to fields or refineries. It's extremely flammable, highly toxic, but could that hydrogen sulfide be introduced into the hydrogen value chain?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously today it's an experiment. There is a couple of initiatives, one from the Ohio University and that has some small pilot scale that was successful. It's called the Sulgan process. It's the chemical compounding process. But if this is successful, that's actually will be a real breakthrough, because you're going to get hydrogen and sulfur, and you don't have any CO2, right? So, but obviously it requires to be able to scale it. And I think all this technology, you're talking still 5 to 7 years at least to try to make it on a scale, and then after that you need to get it economical. But definitely, again, in our region, this is something very significant for us, because we produce a lot of H2S. You know, in a lot of fields today in the region, actually it cannot be produced because of very high H2S, 28%, 30%. You cannot produce these fields, or you have to find a way. Imagine you can, in the same place, you can get this and convert it to hydrogen and sulfur.
And sulfur,
so you produce
both valuable products.
Exactly.
Is blue hydrogen a stepping stone in the medium term towards green hydrogen in the long term?
So I don't like the term blue or green personally. I'm a low carbon hydrogen fan. I believe that we should use the term low carbon because it's not going to be either blue or green alone. The most optimal production will probably be a combination of the two for a lot of reasons. So I believe that blue hydrogen, as you call it, and which is fossil sourced or natural gas based hydrogen production, low carbon hydrogen production, is ready today to scale. So we're already talking about the Jafurah gas hydrogen project of 11 million tons of ammonia by 2030 in that time frame. If that scale was to be transferred to alternative approaches, so that's 11 million tons would require 50 gigawatts of renewable capacity to do with electrolyzers, and it would require 50 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. So today we only have a few gigawatts per year of electrolyzer capacity. So the scale problem is truly a challenge. If we are trying to meet world scale energy requirements, we need basically natural gas-based hydrogen to meet the demand, to enable this transition to work to low carbon. So I feel that the scale issue is not well understood. You know, the typical, for example, you know, a NEOM project of around 5 gigawatts. It's a big renewable project, a very big, a global renewable project. But compared to an oil well, you know, that's equivalent to about 12 to 15,000 barrels a day of oil. You know, so that's a small, you know, kind of oil and gas energy capacity. So you need a lot of those to really meet the 35 or 38 million we're talking about 2050. And I think the fastest way to do that is to move to leverage our existing energy infrastructure and decarbonize it with carbon capture.
So probably there are some synergies between blue and green also in the future as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. As you try to go very low carbon capture with any fossil source, you have the methane, you have the other issues. So there's a higher cost to get to the last 5%, I would say, of CO2 associated with production of hydrogen from natural gas or oil. That last 5% is better done perhaps with a green hydrogen. So you can bring the mix carbon footprint down very economically. So I think you always need a synergy between these two. And there's many other technical synergies as well.
Dr. Serhan, so yes, the NEOM project is probably the production of 15,000 barrels a day only, but in the green hydrogen sphere, this is the biggest green hydrogen project currently in the world. Tell us a little bit more details for the people here. Give us a little bit more details about the project, the capacity, and an update on where the project stands today.
Okay. You really see and hear a lot about MOUs, LOIs, about low carbon hydrogen. I mean, I think you can really see Air Product is walking the talk. Because of that leadership in the gray hydrogen, I mean, we have really announced major projects. They're not MOUs, they're projects in full execution. You mentioned the NEOM project, which is going to be making history, world leader basically in the production of green hydrogen. And we have announced after that the two biggest blue hydrogen projects, the ones in Canada and the one also in Louisiana. These are also world leading, making history also when it comes to blue hydrogen. Coming back to NEOM, I mean, we're really proud and honored, I mean, to team up with NEOM and Aqua Power in Saudi Arabia to produce significant amount of green hydrogen to be used for fuel, for heavy-duty vehicles.
So how many tons are we talking about?
650 metric tons per day. I mean, as I mentioned to you, I mean, our capacity today is around 9,000. So this is 650. The one we announced for a blue hydrogen in Louisiana is 1,850. The one we announced in Canada is 450. So that's basically now adding around like 2,000 metric ton of low carbon hydrogen, adding that to the world. That's pretty significant. Of course, like Ahmed mentioned, it's still a drop in the ocean in regard to the total energy, but it's really a major announcement, project under execution. We have a full project team working on the NEOM project. We're doing site preparation. We're buying long lead items, and will be coming on stream at a very low competitive costs.
In what year?
2026.
2026, we'll be on the lookout. Yeah. Sharif, during oil extraction in the Gulf, so much water is pumped, but it's seawater. Do you think this water, and you mentioned earlier the flared associated gas, could they both be married to produce green hydrogen on site?
Yeah, this is, again, how can you use the current infrastructure to do something different, right? Today, you know, the green hydrogen, the water cannot be, most of the theory is called distilled water, which is, obviously our region does not have water, so we're not gonna make water from our plant to make green hydrogen. It doesn't make sense, right? So the key is, how can you do something about, again, the sector, about the water that we produce? You know, during the production of oil, look at, for example, a country like Oman, where in the south you have huge 90% water cut from the well. So you're talking about 7-8 times the amount of water produced to be able to produce 1 barrel of oil. Can we do something about that water if the salinity works with some technology and use some of the gas to do, which is, Dr. Ahmed said, can you do something hybrid between the blue and the green? It's not really renewable, but you can use the infrastructure of the gas that is, today you almost flare, and use the water that you produce from the oil field. Then the oil sector, the energy sector becomes greener because actually it's producing water instead of using water. Right?
Interesting point. Okay, so I guess we have a minute left, and I want to ask you, Mr. Khweter, how can policymakers best support the nascent low-carbon hydrogen industry? Should it be an infrastructure-led approach by supporting investors, or should it incentivize demand, or should governments themselves create the actual demand centers, at least initially?
So I think the hydrogen option is really the best option for hard to decarbonize sectors, and governments have to recognize that. But it is a costlier option. It is going to cost more. And in the same way that we incentivize renewables, because we recognize the long-term value of renewables, there has to be a demand-side incentive to pay the higher cost of energy. If you look at the use of low-carbon hydrogen in power or in transport, there is a need for support initially. But over time, as the costs come down, we do believe that it will become competitive. So I think the regulation and the standards around what is low-carbon hydrogen is very critical. I think that needs to be accepted and understood so people can design to those standards. I think the need for some incentives on the demand side to be able to allow the difference of energy cost to be covered. And I do believe that there is an infrastructure need. There's a huge infrastructure investment that needs to be made, and that infrastructure needs to be supported, whether carbon capture, whether renewable power projects. There needs to be capital support in those areas, or tax relief in some countries, depending on the jurisdiction. So there really, I think governments have all taken this a different approach, but it all comes down to basically those three means of support that are necessary to kick off and get the scale up and the cost down.
All right, so we're out of time, but the last question is a question that I ended my intro with, the saying in the industry that, clean hydrogen, it's the fuel of the future and always will be. With a vote of a yes or no, will it always will be?
Definitely yes.
Is that probably, you mean it will probably always will be the future fuel?
Definitely yes.
Definitely yes? Okay, what do you say? No or yes?
I believe it's the future of today. Okay. So
it
is
won't
the fuel
always
of today,
will be. It will be. The future has arrived.
Needs to be scaled up.
I guess so.
I think that was. I think we both agree on that.
But
I
Nasser,
think so.
just a comment about the policymakers. I think
Sure.
it's also
Go
very
ahead.
important because everybody talk about the 2050. I think really policymakers need to act now to develop that sense of urgency to try to really incentivize demand and improve demand.
Well, we've got the COP26 coming up in Glasgow, and the fourth day there is all about energy. We're looking out for some decisions and announcements on that front. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. Thank you, audience, for your kind attention.
Thank you.
Just a final note, Ms. Idi Lush will be joining you for the next panel to moderate the network effects on digital finance. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Good job.
Same, change it. Welcome to Network Effects, Investing in Digital Finance. Now, let me give you 3 facts to start. Fact number 1, half of the world's population has a smartphone. Fact number 2, the global digital payments market is worth over $4 trillion, and that is expected to reach nearly $7 trillion by 2023. Fact number 3, inequality is growing for more than 70% of the global population. There is enormous potential for mobile phones and the internet, and actually even for feature phones, to bring people into the local and global economy and to decrease this inequality. But it isn't happening yet. So I am very pleased now to have for you 4 people who are democratizing cash transfer payments, investing. They work all over the world, Asia, Europe, Africa. They are investing in humanity. So let's explore their work and whether it can tackle this inequality. Please welcome CEO of Atari Chain and founder and CEO of Crypto Blockchain Industries, Fred Chenet. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. And I would also like to welcome Chief Strategy Officer, Board Member of Blend Network, Roxana Mohammad. I'm gonna massacre it. I was practicing it this morning. Roxana Mohammadian. Good enough?
Yes,
Molina.
perfect.
Founder and CEO of AIM, Jenna Lee. That was easier.
Yes.
And founder and group CEO of Paga, Tayo Obiasu.
Thanks, Edie. Good to be
Welcome.
here. Thank you.
So, Tayo, let's start with you. Paga is the PayPal of Africa. It may be Africa's next unicorn, I am reliably informed.
Inshallah.
In Nigeria, that smartphone number is less. Penetration of smartphones, only 12% of digital-only strategies don't work. So tell me how Paga is working.
Yeah, Edie, thank you very much for having me here. Really great to be back at FII and to see everybody in person again. So, in today's Africa, most people don't have smartphones. In Nigeria, where I'm from, 200 million people, smartphone penetration is only 12%. So when you're thinking about solving the problems of payments or financial services, you have to think both offline and online. And that is exactly what we've done at Paga, right? We've created a network of what we call agents. These are mom and pop shops, pharmacies and grocery stores in your neighborhood community that people trust. And people can go into those places and get services rendered to them. So they provide the on-ramps and the off-ramps into the digital platform that Paga is, right? And so those agents use the digital platform themselves. And then the consumers can also access our service on a feature phone. So just like making a phone call, it doesn't use any data. You dial *242# on any mobile network, and it pulls up a menu-driven system. Press 1 to send money, press 2 to request money, right? Press 3 to buy airtime, press 4 to pay your bills, right? You can just go through the menus and pay your bills, and you can do all your transactions on a feature phone. So in today's Africa, you have to think about both offline and online. Digital-only strategies on a smartphone doesn't quite work, right? And so that's what we've done, and we've seen this working. We now have over 18.6 million users on our platform. And through the COVID period, we've seen the acceleration of transactions, right? The first 8 years, we processed 2 trillion naira, which ended in March of last year. And then with COVID and the move to digital, in the next 15 months, another 1 trillion. And then the next 1 trillion is in 9 months, even shorter period. So we're seeing that this approach of having an offline-online really does reach the mass market and provides the ability to bring them into formal financial services, and that has huge potential.
So tell me a little about the inequality aspect and how you're seeing the digital payments, your ability to pay your bills via a feature phone, address specifically this issue around inequality.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look at Nigeria, so 61% of people are unbanked, don't have a formal access to financial services. They're saving in very inefficient ways. And so what all of these technologies do is it gives them a way to put their money in a secure place that is insured by the government insurance corporation, right? And that way they're actually able to better use their money, right? They'll be able to secure their savings and their livelihood. And then it's also helping them, earn more, right? So we're also bringing services to people, creating jobs, right? And so that is helping lift people out of poverty as well, right? So that's the potential that these kinds of services have as we scale across not just Nigeria, but the continent.
And they trust the phones.
They trust the people that they're using, and they trust the service.
So
right?
they trust the agents that they go in.
They trust the agent, they see that it works, and then they trust the brand and the service because they see it works, right? So it's less about the phone itself, right? But more that they know that this brand works, right? And that's what they've come to believe in because somebody else told them about it and they saw it working, and then they got to use it.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on for a moment to Fred. We'll stay in Africa for the moment. That's why I want to come to you. You wear two hats, but we're going to start with the CBI hat, the crypto blockchain industries one. First of all, why do you see the future of payments in mobile money?
Well, I think the most important fact, and it really addresses the issue of inequality, is that if you want to open an account at a bank today, you will have to go through, properly a lot of, know your customer, KYC regulations, applications. And I believe that in many countries, it is very difficult for anyone to be able to go through and pass the test. So what we've seen, at least what I've experienced personally, is that you have a reduced, I would say, level or a reduced standard to get a phone and to get a mobile account. I don't start with the premise that everyone is trying to cheat taxes, is a terrorist. So I believe that there's a need if you have someone who doesn't have a home, who doesn't have an ID, but I believe that there's a need for that person to be able to access some form of financial instrument. Otherwise, that person will remain excluded, right, from the global economic system. So and that person especially, I do work in the DRC, Congo, in Kenya, Liberia, Guinea. It's not because the person doesn't have a home or is not able to justify that they are living here, that they should not have access to something. Back to what we were saying earlier, is that they trust the system. Why? Because the telco is telling them, give me one local currency. I guarantee you that when you want to exit, I'm going to give you the same one currency. Give me a Kenyan shilling. I'm going to give you a digital shilling, but if you want to exit, I'm going to give you back one, less a few fees that we'll accept. But that's, for me, that's key. They trust the telcos.
So how are you working in Africa?
So we do, my DNA is gaming. I've done that for a certain number of years. I believe, I start with, what I know the best, which is games on telephones. And we know that this is a nice way to capture a significant portion of the population, especially the youth. And as we know, in Africa, population is very, very young. So we start with what we know the best, and it's really games on telephones. It doesn't have to be smartphones. We also have games on, with old phones. You can play with USSD program, which is, call it like the old SMS. And that's fun because we are growing, and we're not only following the population, we're also trying to bring some new games. And we follow not only the population, but also the evolution of the network and the evolution of the install base. For the moment, it's difficult to work with feature phones. And even if you have, I think they have a lot of feature phones, but what's very expensive is, access to the internet. I think it's going to change in the next 2 to 3 years. And at the end of the day, I think what you're going to see is a much, much, much broader revolution, which is today you have, give or take a few, 4 billion people connected to the internet. And I think in the next 2, 3, maybe 5 years, I'm not saying it's going to double, but you're going to go from 4 to 6 billion. And this is where we're going to see a big revolution.
And what are you doing to reduce inequality?
Look, in Africa, for us, it's more difficult. It's more on the blockchain side, what we're doing, and I think we'll come back to that in a second. In terms of the traditional business, we have in Africa, as part of the regulations, we have to reinvest a portion of our profits in local initiatives. So we do support charity programs in Kenya, Miss Scotch, for instance, or a few charities as well in the DRC and in other countries. But as far as the traditional business goes, this is the extent of what we are doing, yes.
Okay, we'll come back to you in a minute. Roxana, let's come to you now. Now, Blend Network is a digital lending platform to property developers. So tell me a little bit about it now.
Thank you, Edith, and great to be back at FII this year. Over the past 3 days, we've heard a lot about, leaders and speakers about the challenges of today and the need to invest in humanity. And we've heard about the importance of investing for impact, for change, and the fact that we are at a juncture in time that is really is not enough to talk the talk. We really need to, get into action and walk the walk. And we've also heard about how technology is really a gateway for opportunities. And I think we cannot talk about opportunities without talking about digital finance. And I will talk more concretely about what we do and give you an example, but it's just really about, I see digital finance as connecting opportunities with choices. So my company, Blend Network, is a fintech company that operates a digital lending platform. So we are a non-bank lender, and we provide development finance debt to property developers, to SME property developers and small construction companies that are building sustainable, ESG compliance, affordable, and climate-friendly houses. So I think it's better explained in a really to tell you a story how it works and how we are trying to really support this sustainability. So the time is, it was last year, 28th of April 2020, in the middle of the lockdown, the biggest lockdown that we've had, most of us sitting at home and figuring out what to do next. I get an email from a small property developer in the UK called Richard, in his 50s, a lot of experience in property development, doing it since starting his career for over 30 years, very stressed. The reason very stressed is that him and his business partner, they are working on a project and they are about to exchange on this project to build 52 sustainable houses somewhere in Wales in the UK. And at the last minute, the lender, a high street, a well-known high street bank, pulls out of the deal. Obviously, we are in the middle of the lockdown and what we call, the lockdown on lending. So this happened a lot. A lot of banks, they decided to focus on existing customers and on essentially channeling, the government help to SMEs and to entrepreneurs. So property developers were not a priority. And many property developers, like this one who contacted us, they were left out in the cold. And the project was great. So we looked at the project. It was, a great project to build 52 sustainable houses, eco-friendly homes, a great exit on the project because we are short-term lenders, so we look at the exit. A great experience of the two business partners, and so we decided to lend on this loan. So we obviously have an in-house team that does the due diligence. We decide to lend on this loan. The loan goes on our platform, which is a peer-to-peer lending platform. So we have investors who are registered and they can see the deal. And the deal was funded by 95 investors in less than 2 hours. And I think this story is just, it gives you an example of how what I mentioned is about connecting opportunities with, choices. Choices for investors who were able to invest on this deal. They got access to a great financial return, but not only the financial return, the ability to contribute to a project, a very tangible result. They were helping a property developer build 52 sustainable homes. And the opportunity for the property developer to obviously unlock the funding that they needed to build the houses. So this is just a concrete example, I think, of nowadays how digital finance is helping connect opportunities and choices.
In the UK, there's a lot of focus on leveling up, which is the idea is we're trying to bring people who live outside of the southeast of London to a better life, better opportunities. So how does your platform help them do that?
So, we've all talked about, we all know about the need to build better, to build greener, to build more sustainable, but especially now after COVID, there's a lot of, pressure on government finances. And I think in the past, I have seen this change in mentality and this change in the narrative. Before, we all know that we need to change and we need to be more sustainable, but before it was about, well, that's the government's job. The government is here to do it, or the big organizations, the big banks, the big energy companies are here to do that, to do exactly that. But now it's about how can we all do it? It's about me, you, everyone in this room. And I think platforms like ours and like many others, they are allowing retail investors to contribute to this change, because I can put, $5,000, £4,000
What's the
into
minimum?
this. £1,000.
£1,000.
Yes, so I think this change in narrative is about not let them do the change and let them build greener, better, more sustainable. It's how can I contribute to this? Yeah. And going back to the agenda, the leveling up agenda, now this is an opportunity for everyone to be able to contribute to this, because more than ever before, the government finances are, under stress after COVID, and we can all contribute, and is an opportunity to be part of the solution effectively.
Interesting. Thank you. So, Jenna, let's come to you, and a very different market from the one that Tayo is operating in. 12% smartphone penetration in Korea, 98% smartphone.
Other way around.
97% smartphone penetration. So how does AIM work, and what are you doing?
So I come from a quantitative hedge fund background where I served premier institutions with minimum account size of $250 million. So just to get started, you need that money to get your separately managed accounts. So even I wasn't able to get into our funds as I was a manager. So looking at this problem for Henrys, high earnings, not rich yet. You see so many
Henrys.
Henrys.
I love that. High earnings, not rich yet. Henrys. Okay.
We're helping Henrys to build their wealth and have safety net using a mobile app. So think of AIM, automated investment management, as an algorithm-based hedge fund manager in your mobile phone. We only charge 1% fee upfront, nothing more. We're about, we have 1 million users in Korea, manage about $750 million now.
What's the minimum?
Its minimum is $3,000. Used to be $5,000. We're lowering it to get to the longer tail market. But it's been a challenge because of the infrastructure. In the US, you could easily get into fractional shares. In Korea, it wasn't existent. So I was going to talk about how the infrastructure has to be laid out for innovators to work on top of it. In some of these markets, you have to work with what you have, and sometimes you have to build everything yourself. So of the 6-7 years that I put myself into AIM, about 2-3 years were spent on working with existing broker infrastructure. Getting the accounts or opening the accounts was hard for our clients. Once that product market fit was done, we were able to grow the company from like 200 million, 10, it was amazing how we grew from 10 million to 100 million, 500 million, 750 million. But with that came regulators, competition, fierce competition. But what gets me going is serving this client. We really respect what they're doing in their lives. They're hardworking, smart people who want to have a better life. And there's that disparity between the highly developed world versus the emerging wealthy nations in Asia. And we'd like to bridge that gap of access, information, and largely education about the financial markets.
So how does it work? Tell me, I open the app on the phone, I'm a Henry. What happens then? I've got $3,000 in there, then what happens?
So we give you some survey, we do some back of the server analysis on what your true risk tolerance is. We don't just believe you.
Right.
So you might end up getting a not so aggressive portfolio if you're spending a lot compared to your peer group that's earning as much money. We say aimers tend to aim for higher or better future versus aiming for present. So that risk appetite is assessed differently in our system. And there's the alpha generation component. We do use ETFs, New York Stock Exchange traded ETFs, all dollar-based. We focus on giving you a strategy that diversifies your portfolio, meaning it's a global strategy ex your country. So in Korea, people are getting global ex-Korean strategy, which diversifies your portfolio to 77 countries and 12,400 underlying assets. What you do on our app is just put in a bunch of your preferences and get advice. And once you get the portfolio asset allocation, just like the institutional guys, you click on the button. It will tell you how many shares you would get, at what price. It's all projected. And we aim to give you a residual. When executions are not done for the day, we'll give you residual advisory the next day. So orders are good for the day. In a way, you're getting the advice, very intelligent advice, and an ability to trade on your mobile app, same app. With that, we're really happy that we're adding to your, we're value adding to your life.
Do you have any data on how you are increasing or decreasing this inequality or making these people's lives better?
So yeah, we started out with that $5,000 hurdle, and we lowered it to $3,000. And what we're seeing is there's a much more higher penetration into the female investors who used to be more conservative. I think they used to save more than going into financial products. I think the investment world has been very much bipolar. If you're a safe haven seeking investor, you'd go into real estate in Korea because there's a downside protection. You can sit on it. Meanwhile, if you're aggressive, you'd go Robinhood, you'd buy Amazon.
Right.
So that's what they're doing. We're just building that middle ground. We are actually, 20, so we used to be 20% female versus 80% male client base. Now it's evening out a little bit, so 35 to 65. That means a lot. It's like 100% more penetration into what people who have been left out. Also, there's millennial, I think millennial pain. Millennials are getting into Bitcoin, crypto, to get higher returns quickly. They feel they are missing out. They have missed out on the last generation's growth. So, do they always have to have a speculative asset class predominant in their portfolio, or can we provide some alternatives as a safe haven? So that's also, what I have such passion for. And
Fantastic.
yeah.
Thank you. Let's stay on the gender point. So, tell me about the number of women using your platform, either as users or agents.
Yeah, so in terms of users, we don't have the exact numbers for all the user base, but I would say for the agents, about 35% of our storekeepers are women.
These are like 7-Elevens or...
Yeah, it's like a typical 7-Eleven neighborhood store where you go in and buy bread and provisions, things like that. And some of our top agents are women as well. And so it's been really good seeing the impact on them and also the jobs they're creating, right?
Give me an example.
As well. So a typical storekeeper has at least two tellers, 2 people they hire just for the Paga business, right? And in Nigeria, the statistic is that
for the Paga business?
Just for the Paga business, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And in Nigeria, the statistic is that for every 1 person employed, 4 adults are depending on them. So it's a multiplier effect in terms of the impact we're having, right? Over 60,000 agent points, everyone hiring, 2 people, right? It just multiplies in terms of that. By the way, I think this conversation here is a real interesting view of the world, right? We have, where I am, where we're trying to just solve payments and access to savings and loans, just basic financial services, to investing in real estate, right? And making that accessible to the middle class and for people to also level up and then to investing, in stocks and just like listening to you guys and I'm like, wow, this is the roadmap we have to go in Africa. Right. That's what's ahead of us.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah.
So Roxana, just tell me about the gender aspect of your investors as well.
Yes, I mean, the gender investment gap is something that I'm personally very passionate about. We all know the statistics. Women have cash, but they don't invest. And this is, is not just a statement, there are statistics around it. There was a survey saying that 1 in 2 women, they've never held an investment account, they've never invested. There was another really interesting one that said, 61% of women would rather talk about their own death than money. So we are
Their
really
own death
yes,
than money.
Than money.
Crikey.
So women don't like to invest and talk about money, so we are very passionate about the gender investment gap, and over 50% of our lenders on the projects are women. We do a lot of work around this, but I think there are also several reasons. When one researches into why women don't invest, you often find that the language that are used by many investment providers, it doesn't tend to be a very female-focused language, because women are driven by a different set of motivations when investing. Obviously, the financial return is a factor. We all want to make money and get a good return, but there are there's more into it. For example, the impact of the investment that you are doing. So when in platforms like ours, when the investor is able to pick and choose the projects that they want to invest in, see that exactly, the property developer is going to build 30 houses in such and such street, you can go and see it, you are making this impact. I think this is a theme that tends to be appealing to women, and is something that is easy to understand. You see the impact that you are making. So I think this is one factor that.
Do you think financial education? Do you see financial education as part of what you're doing?
We are very open and vocal about the need for women to invest, and definitely I think the transparency and yes, we are very open in talking about this topic. So I think financial education is a big part of it, and for us it's very important to be able to open these platforms to more and more female investors. But also on the other side, by the way, on the borrower side, we have quite a lot of female property developers, which might think there are not many, but we do have a lot of female property developers.
I know quite a few.
And I must say that, we actually really like the profile of the female property developers, because in terms of the risk, sometimes they tend to be a lot more kind of sensible, and, the topic idea that you think, a man will come to you and say, how much do you want to borrow? Well, as much as I can. And the woman, will have their numbers and kind of really, a bit more sensitive on their numbers. So we like the more conservative profile of the borrower that is a female property developer. That's the other side of the coin.
Thanks. Does gender matter on the blockchain, Fred?
Well, not really. Our activities are more, and we are kind of gender agnostic, so to say. The goal for us is more to bring more people into the system, to have more access for people who are currently excluded from the system, and bring them on the blockchain into the metaverse. Metaverse is a word that has been pronounced many times during the last few days. And I think it's very important to understand what it really means and where the difference is, right?
What does it mean for you, the metaverse?
I mean, the most important thing is to compare it to the current world that exists, because virtual worlds, I mean, this is not new. I've done online worlds for not 20 years, but at least 15 years, as far as I remember. So a virtual world is not new, okay? The real difference today is the word blockchain. It's because it's on the blockchain that this is so different, and that this is the reason why this is going to change. Let me just explain, in maybe I could spend hours, but in 30 seconds. Virtual worlds today, if you want to go play, interact, you need to have a bank account, you need to have a card, a credit card. Your money goes from your bank account to the operator, to Apple, Google, and then to the publisher. And whatever you do in this world, you cannot transpose it into another video game or another virtual world. Each of them, these are silos, and to access this world, just like if you want to make a transaction on the internet, you need a credit card. Back to KYC, AML. If you don't have a bank account, you're excluded. The metaverse is on the blockchain, meaning anyone can create a wallet. Today is going to take, 5 minutes, 3 minutes? If you manage to buy some cryptocurrency, you can earn it on the internet. You don't need a bank account to earn this crypto. Then you can go into the metaverse. And what's going to happen is completely different for two reasons. One, you will do a transaction not with the game operator, but with somebody else. And you're going to do that transaction on the blockchain with cryptocurrencies. There's not going to be any bank in the middle. It's going to be from your wallet to another wallet. No bank, no one is going to interfere. That's the revolution. There's a big, big difference. The second big difference is in a video game, a virtual world today, what you do in that game stays if what you do in that virtual world stays there. You can't take it out. You're kind of prisoner in that virtual world. Because you're on the metaverse, and this is where the notion of blockchain plays a very, very significant role, and what we call interoperability is that what you do with NFTs, non-fungible tokens, you can take them out and you can use them, assuming there's interoperability, you can use them in another metaverse. So whatever you do here, you grind, you do, you create, you sell, you earn something, so you can take it out.
So you might earn a fancy one-off car or a beautiful outfit that you're putting on your avatar. How do you take that out of that gaming world?
Because it's yours, it's in your wallet. So you can just you say, thank you very much, I'm going to go to the other guys, assuming there is interoperability, you'll be able to sell it on a marketplace. These are the two main differences. Everyone is talking about metaverses, but this is because of the blockchain. If blockchain wasn't there, we would still be with the same virtual worlds and there would not be any difference. Now you can go, you have the tools, it's peer-to-peer transaction. On the blockchain, no one can control it. No one controls the metaverse. That's the whole point. No one controls Bitcoin today. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. Some may say this is the nightmare, some may say this is the dream. My point is, I'm just stating the fact. No one controls Bitcoin. You can't stop Bitcoin unless you you turn off the internet. That's fine. You can't change the code unless everyone on the Bitcoin network decide at the same time to change and increase that $21 million barrier at the same time on each and every computer. So no one controls it. Again, I'm not saying it's a dream or a nightmare. I'm just saying it's a fact. And this is why the metaverses are so important. It's not because it's a virtual world. I've done zombie games, survival games 15 years ago. They're still rolling, they're still paying royalties. But they were not on the blockchain. The whole point is the blockchain and the crypto and the fact that you can go, it's peer-to-peer transactions, we're giving you the tools. That's the big revolution. And anyone can access.
So, Ty, are you using blockchain and how are you approaching crypto?
Yeah, we're currently not using blockchain, but we're big believers in the blockchain technology and also big believers in a cashless world. So at Paga, we are going to go to cryptocurrency.
You are going to?
We are going to. Currently, the Nigerian government does not allow for financial services companies to do cryptocurrencies outside of the Nigerian digital naira. So we'll start with the digital naira in Nigeria, but outside of Nigeria, we will go towards cryptocurrency next year.
And tell me why, because what role does cryptocurrency play in Africa?
Yeah, Nigeria is actually, by transaction value, the second largest of Bitcoin traded, right? And it's really interesting.
Second largest Bitcoin
traded, yeah.
And why is that?
And the big reason is a lot of it is people trying to move money in and out of Nigeria.
So remittances.
For remittances, yeah. And that's because there are a lot of FX controls that make it a bit harder to move money into Nigeria. Earlier this year, the Nigerian Central Bank came out with a rule that all FX into Nigeria must land in US dollars, either into domiciliary account in Nigeria or given in US dollars in cash. And that actually, crashed a lot of remittance through the formal channels. So a lot of people are using cryptocurrency now and working with over-the-counter traders, individuals, to bring money in and out of Nigeria. And so I think my hope is that the central bank will change this position. And we've had plenty of debates.
With them to do that?
We've had plenty of debates and discussions about it. I think they will eventually, right? Because I don't think it's that they're against cryptocurrency. I think, like any government, they want to have control of the monetary policy. they want to have control of the financial rails and of remittances. And I think they're also worried about money laundering and things like that. So they're legitimate concerns and protecting consumers, but those concerns can be addressed, right? And my view is that countries will have their own digital currency. I'm on the advisory board for the US digital dollar. And countries have their own digital currencies, but cryptocurrencies are here to stay. So I agree with Fred. Bitcoin's not going anywhere. Ethereum's not going anywhere. And anybody can go create their own coin. If people want to use it, they'll use it. So I think currently it's seen as an asset class for people for value creation, but over time it's going to be used for trading, for people into day-to-day lives, and that's our vision. And we think that that can really help, especially in Africa, right? For people to actually, look, the person who's making 100,000 naira in Nigeria in a month, who hasn't had a salary raise over a year, that 100,000 has devalued by 16%, inflation 16% in Nigeria. So, and then the FX rate.
Same in parts of Latin America
the FX
as well,
rate,
right?
Maybe worse in Argentina, from what I hear. But the FX rate has also devalued significantly, even higher than inflation, right? So, cryptocurrency has value for people, and I think governments need to sort of, think about that and accept it like the U.S. and other places are starting to accept it, because it's the future, right?
Does it matter that the Chinese have banned cryptocurrency?
It does, and it's a really unfortunate decision. I do hope the Chinese government changes that, because they can play a real strong leadership role on this stuff. Because they, in terms of countries having their own digital currency, the digital RMB has been out now, tested I think in 3 or 4 cities, and it's going to be spread across China very soon. So I'm hoping that they will turn around on that decision, because by a big country, big powerhouse like that making that kind of a decision gives credence. If I'm talking to the Nigerian Central Bank, well, what about China? So I hope China comes around, and I was glad to see the U.S. government immediately come out and say that we're not following that step.
Jenna, how do you look at cryptocurrency, and does the blockchain help you at all?
Yes. Two things. When we advise clients about investing in cryptocurrencies, I have said that I see it as an alternative asset class. There's a distinction between gold or treasuries versus crypto. But as you construct your portfolio, you have to be absolutely certain you're going in for a certain portion of your portfolio into traditional asset classes with very much studied risk-return characteristics versus what we're studying now as we're making history together into a new class of asset. So that's my advice from an advisor perspective. But as an entrepreneur, I have much more hopeful ideas about how to transform our legacy infrastructure that we built on top of to get AIM going. But once you reach a scale, we're about to cross 1 billion AUM. Once that's done, I think we'd like to be ready to start using wallets to cross borders, serve much more, wider, audience, more aimers, using our platform.
Finding Henrys around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, using wallets. Also, we're doing US dollar-based investing. There's huge benefits to that for especially emerging markets or local currencies that are very volatile. So can you replace that USD component with USDT, for instance, or can you come up with some other stablecoin structure that's more trusted? These are infrastructural innovation that we would love to get involved with our scale. And once that's done, our ultimate goal is to think about asset-backed tokens or even TRS, total return swaps.
What are those?
So in essence, people just want returns on their money. It doesn't have to be you opening an account, sending your local currency, and converting that currency, and sending it to your overseas broker to execute on the NICE exchange and get that custodian back rolling into your local country to book it. Can you all bypass that by saying, hey, there's this coin or AIM coin that is backed by underlying stocks? Call it a new class of ETF. It's just a vehicle storing value. Instead of moving coins into ETF format, can you do the opposite? Can you make that happen? And you become the next BlackRock.
Great, that's a good ambition. Tell me about a challenge you're having at the moment around regulation, and what's that making you do?
So I came back to Korea knowing that there's a lot of deregulation happening. We were having our form of PayPal or Venmo in Korea popping up in 2015. I saw these changes happening, and we wanted to be ready for that change to happen, to progress into pure tech, into more thin domain, which is wealth management that we focus on. What I hadn't realized as much was the pace of innovation or pace of deregulation would be much slower. But another aspect is once you realize what you're trying to do becomes all of a sudden illegal, how do you revamp your model? How do you remodel your components in your business?
Why was it illegal?
So it's interesting, right? So the robo-advisory industry in the States gave a lot of inspirations to digital advisors in Asia, where I think the difference in Asia is most of the newly developed countries have a very tight government control or guidance, where you have just 10 banks in Korea that's operating, like major banks. There's only 4, big consumer banks that generate $4 billion revenue or net profit every year, net $4 billion. So heavily concentrated, and it's essentially oligopoly. Works very much in tandem with the government intentions, mostly good intentions, right? So having a tight control by the government, you have to, I think you have to be very savvy about what your innovation is construed as by the incumbents. If they see it as threat, they'll do a very smart regulation. I think they would come up with some stipulate, very small stipulate, in terms of getting a client on board. And say, hey, because this law says, or this stipulate says, investment document has to be handed in person.
Right.
This little thing will deter you from getting everything online.
Right.
Just one little procedure that's going to make everything collapse. So when that happened, we said, we got a lot of calls from brokers who wanted to collaborate with us and make it offline. Right? Saying, oh, Jenna, we want to work with you. You're doing great things. But did you know you couldn't do that yourself?
You need a partner.
Yes. And it's that broker, that very broker, who went to the government and asked for the interpretation of the law.
Wow.
And that happened 2 months after we launched. So with that, we had to reconfigure our business processes we're not all automated.
Right.
It looks like online advisory is legal. So we're going to do that. And as far as execution comes, it's going to be an explicit approval by the client. It's not all automated and discretionary. So that had to be done. So product market fit, or getting that product out, took us 2 years.
Wow.
Just reconfiguring everything. And once that was done, and once we are building great performance, getting the word of mouth out, this is the commercialization stage, right? Product building and commercialization. When the latter was taking off, we were very successful in educating people on YouTube. So I have my channel, Ask Jenna, with 300,000 followers. It grew, but we had to stop.
Right.
In the end, what happened was, me explaining ETFs, just ETFs, pure concept, was interpreted as unregulated advertisement of financial products or financial services. So I'm being heavily fined at the moment for each of those lists. My speech is fined at $10,000.
Crumbs.
So
Okay.
I got the bill of, I would say, $1 million fine for explaining things. And they're going to lower it eventually. It's come down to, I think, 300K at this point.
Right.
So that happened.
Okay.
So we were going to talk about Squid Game, right?
That's right. So it sounds like it's the Squid Game of financial services.
Fierce, right?
Fierce,
Competition.
brutal, and ends in tears.
Wow.
Let's pause there. I want to know if any of you have a cautionary tale, a Squid Game tale of regulation, or something that you'd like to bring up, Fred.
Yes and no. I think at the end of the day, you know, back to the theme of this meeting, you know, investing in digital finance. I see, like, think about three big trucks, right? You have the regulators, the banks, and the consumers. The consumers, it's super easy. When it's not possible because of the regulators, they are going to tell you why I should be able to do it. And when it's possible, they just don't want, or they no longer want to pay the fees of the banks. So you have a big truck, the masses coming. The truck from the regulators, they are trying to control this rightly, because of course there needs to be some control, some form of system, especially talking about international transfers. And then you have the banks in the middle, the traditional banks. And what I'm seeing, this is why, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I am investing in digital finance, is the only thing I can see for sure happening is the squeeze of the margins of the banks. Why do I have to pay to send someone from Europe to Africa a certain percentage? Why does it take 36 hours to do it? I think I understand it, but the masses, the consumers, they don't want to understand that. So that's why I'm investing in digital finance.
Right.
Because of all these three big trucks, at the end of the day, I think there's going to be the one from the banks that is going to have some very hard time just keeping their margin, keeping the businesses, especially when you have cryptos, blockchain, transfers with cryptocurrencies in 1 second from one place to another. It's going to be difficult. And I think the regulators will stay, of course. And at the end of the day, you're going to have like two big trucks.
Yeah.
And this is why digital finance is super important.
I think regulators overall get a bad rap.
Right.
They're trying to protect consumers. They're trying to set the right regulatory policies and monetary policies, and yet technology is moving so fast. So they also have to play catch up to understand the new technologies. So I tend to have a bit more empathy for that, you know, like there's just a lot of learning that we have to help them with and get them there fast enough because the consumers are not waiting, right?
Is that possible? Can you give me an example of how you've done it?
Well, I've seen, for example, Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay. He's one of his fintech fund is one of my investors, Flourish. And what they've done is they bring together regulators from all over the world together to a gathering to tell them and help teach them about the upcoming fintech technologies. I've seen them do it twice. I attended one of it. And I think that's a great idea. And I think more people need to do that. To say it's not about lobbying you about anything. It's just here's the new technology. Here's where the world's going, right? And I've seen it with Nigerian Central Bank, inviting us and other players in the industry to come and speak on new technologies. I was asked to come speak on cryptocurrency at the payments retreat of the central bank in September, right? So I think they're all trying to figure out this new landscape of where the world is going, but they see the potential of digital finance and of how it can help lift people out of poverty and how it's the future, right? I think they generally do.
Roxanne, have you come up against any issues with regarding regulation, and how do you work with the regulators?
So in our industry, the peer-to-peer market in the UK is actually the second biggest market in the world after the US, except China. And I think that the reason for that is really the regulation, because the FCA has really tightly regulated this industry and ultimately created trust. So I think that regulation is key to create trust, especially when you are dealing with retail, customers. We don't have that many retail customers, but still is a key part. I think having a good regulation, and especially clarity and predictability of the landscape, I think this is the most important. So in terms of challenges, no, obviously, it's good to have more rather than less regulation, and we understand that, and this is the environment that we operate, and I think that this is good for the entire industry. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, that's a good place to end for us. Cryptocurrency, investing, mobile money, payments, blockchain, they will all be the infrastructure of the future. And we hope that they can also help us build this inclusive future. And that's what we've managed to explore today. We hope that it won't be a repeat of some of the early promises of the internet, which failed to live up to what we hoped. Maybe it's up to all of us to decide where this goes. So thank you so much to Fred, to Jenna, to Roxana, to Tayo for joining me here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. What a few days we've had. It's exciting to be here back on the stage today. And we've got a real treat for you today because we're going to be discussing AI and the future of AI. I don't know about you, but for me, it was always the stuff of sci-fi. But now we're finding increasingly it's integrated into everyday life, and a lot more so than I think we would probably realize. So to discuss how investments will drive the next wave of intelligent machines, I'd like to introduce our panel. Dr. Majid Al-Tawadri, CEO of the National Center for Artificial Intelligence at Saudi Data and AI Authority. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
We have Antonio Simeoni, founder of Euclid, algo trader and financial journalist. We have Pascal Weinberger, CEO and co-founder of Bardeen AI. And Michael Janis, I'm going to have to struggle to pronounce your name. Let me get this right. Janizowski.
Very good.
Oi, got there. Chief Operating Officer, Asset Servicing and Digital at BNY Mellon. Thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Majid, I wanted to begin with you and ask you, how will AI shape all aspects of business, work, and life and leisure over the next decade?
Thank you, Jane, and it's good to be here with the distinguished speakers. I think you said it right, Jane. We use AI in our daily lives. I mean, when we wake up in the morning, drive the car, use GPS, or driving assistance, this is all AI. Our kids at home play games using AI. So AI is already blended in our life, more than we think we do. But the future is going to be even exponential more. We will see that in every place where data makes sense. I think in areas like healthcare, in banking, in transportation, in many walks of life where data is really growing exponential, you will see AI also growing exponential.
How do we measure? We talk about this big data. Pascal, what does that mean to you, and how are things changing there?
Yeah, I think when we look at AI, we always have to look at it in the context of how do we train such an algorithm. And for most commonly used machine learning techniques like deep learning, recommendation engines, and so on that we see and use in our daily lives today, they all rely on massive amounts of training data in order for them to understand the underlying structures of that data, which they can then use to make predictions, make forecasts, or recommendations, or depending on what the use case is. So I think as AI becomes increasingly important, obviously the quality and the amount of training data that we have available for us to train such algorithms also increasingly becomes more and more important. And then currently there's this whole movement to contrast with that about training algorithms with small amounts of data. So like what we call few-shot learning, which is also pretty interesting because there's a lot of applications that we don't have a massive amount of training data for. You know, for example, for doing recognition on rare diseases. Obviously, if a disease only occurs, you know, in 0.something% of the population, we don't have massive amounts of training data to recognize it. So those are, I think, the two distinct areas of machine learning that are both very important for distinct applications.
What will the next generation of AI be capable of, and what opportunities does that present?
It's very hard to tell, obviously. I think, and like what we're also working on is really trying to focus on this human-machine collaboration idea of machine learning, which actually, if you go back all the way to like Ada Lovelace and so on, like I think like inventors of the field of machine learning, they were describing this idea of very seamless interaction between computers and humans. And that's also, I think, what this next generation of machine learning hopefully focuses on, where we can then essentially, instead of trying to replace human labor, we can try to make humans and like workers more effective at what they're doing, to try to essentially take all the boring and annoying work away from them so that we can really focus on the things that we're best at, that machines are currently not so good at.
The cutting and pasting jobs.
Yeah, essentially that.
I want to bring in at this point Antonio, and we talked a little backstage, about there is this concern that AI is going to replace us humans. It sounds like something out of a Terminator movie, the machines are going to take over. Is that really the case? I mean, a report from the World Economic Forum estimated that AI was actually going to create 97 million jobs, new jobs, by 2025.
Yeah. In fact, I want to talk about my experience in the financial sector. So we create some structure, different algos that replace, 500, 1,000 financial traders or analysts. In our case, I'm an algo trader, so we replace the work of 1,000 traders of the investment bank, of the financial institutions. And in our algos, in one algo, for example, we can see an historical data or pattern, micro pattern, into a deeply way thanks to AI, and we manage another fund on biotech, and we are integrated two different AI. So one AI study analyzes the scientific paper, the team of research of the biotech, molecules, etc. And this is a qualitative AI, and we are integrating with an AI quantitative. So we are replaced two different sectors, in the biotech and in the financial industry. And probably, yes, in the future, algos probably could replace many humans.
Okay. I mean, you answered that right at the end. You slipped that one in. I mean, I want to open that up to Michael. What are your thoughts on, the job front, whether they're going to replace humans?
Yeah, so I think the phenomenon we're seeing, and if we're playing it forward 10 years, is that AI, we're at a period now where it's augmented intelligence, right? It's person and then computer. I think we're quickly approaching person and computer, which means the AI is accomplishing human tasks either at or above a human threshold. And we're already seeing that in computer vision, in natural language processing, and other things. And what it means is that the new jobs will be created, but roles will have to change. And this idea of collaborating with a technology partner in the same way that you would collaborate with a human partner is something that we're going to see a lot more of.
At the moment, though, it's a tool. What happens when it gets so intelligent that it can program itself?
Well, it already does. So programs around OpenAI and GPT-3 are in fact already creating code to accomplish an outcome currently.
And I think, so if I might jump in, this is like, there's also this idea of optimization algorithms that we've used since 20 years to optimize other machine learning algorithms. So if you will, then that's already like AI training AI, right? But I think also to add on this other point that you mentioned, there's a lot of things that machines are really good at that humans are really bad at. Like if I asked you to look at 10 million medical records and identify the common pattern and then look at this like new patient and see if you can find this common pattern, like no human physically even could accomplish such a task, but machines do it in seconds or milliseconds today. But then on the other side, we are really good at doing things that computers are really bad at today. Like, just asking a simple question like, can an elephant play tennis? Like every 2-3-year-old child will like laugh a little bit and then say like, no, of course not. But for a computer to understand that, it's actually like a pretty non-trivial task. And even the most advanced algorithms that we have today, like GPT-3 and so on, they're struggling. If you provide the right context, then they will say, yes, of course, an elephant can play tennis, because maybe in the sentence before you gave it context of how that could work, and they don't have this idea of common sense and common knowledge. So I think that's why this idea of collaboration will be really, really important, as you mentioned.
So what kind of goals should we be providing AI with, and how important is that?
That's a very interesting question. I think
tricking you on the stage. You're under the
I think so from a idealistic standpoint, obviously, I think from what I know, also like most people are building these algorithms with a specific task in mind. Like even GPT-3, which arguably is the most human algorithm that we see today, like people are using it to have conversations as a chatbot and so on, or text generation. That's a so-called autoregressive sequence generation model. So it's trained to do is to predict the next token or word, if you will, of a sequence of words that you provided with, which in itself is a pretty simplistic task. But then if you train it on trillions of sentences, basically the whole internet, which OpenAI team and Microsoft did there, then you can see that it sort of understands the structures of language and seems to have understood some common sense, but really what it's doing is just predicting the next token or the next sentence. So I think it's really hard to think about setting like really common goals. Like we humans, arguably our goal is to evolution, reproduce, and gain social status, and blah blah blah. That type of stuff is really hard to program into any kind of machine learning algorithm, and therefore I think it will take a pretty long time until we see, arguably human behavior, like actually human behavior in machine learning. So. Yeah.
I think I want to direct this over to Dr. Majid as well. I mean, for you and your experience, what companies and visionaries do you feel are driving the greatest advancements in AI, and how have some of these been adopted here in the kingdom?
Thank you. I think the good thing about AI is the time from lab to production is very short. So unlike other disciplines where it takes years, I think now it takes months from an idea in a lab to be utilized in the real life. And I can think of really AI as really augmenting our intelligence. Humanity has been always striving for more intelligence. With every invention, we want to be smarter as human beings. We want to be more efficient. And we've been always scared of new technologies. I mean, this is not new to AI, but to any advancement that the human being has taken, I think they've been scared about that. And I think AI, I can think of it as really augmenting our capability and smartness. Today, when we look for rare disease that we want to find solution for, our capacity as a human being to look for billions and billions of data in the genome and linking that with the clinical data in the hospital, linking that with the way we have our consumer health informatics, the way we walk, the way we eat, it's really present huge amount of data that we as human beings have the capacity to solve. But then we invented AI to help us solve that problem. So I can think of AI as a way that we human created to make us smarter, and we shouldn't worry about that, because we human has been always created with this new unique features that we've been always able to be adapting to the environment. I mean, look at the COVID situation. In the first month, we were all panicking. Now we are living with it. This is the human being. So I feel that we want to take advantage of that, not neglecting the risks. The risks are there, and risks has to be covered with the right governance. Healthcare is an area I believe can be disrupted with AI. And I think we see one of our doctors here with us today who invented, for example, using AI for retinopathy and really solving the blindness of diabetic patient, which is 30% of our population. Education, I feel it will be disrupted. Today, if you look at kids at school, studying 5 years of programming, the time they finish and graduate, that programming code is obsolete. So the way we learn has to be disrupted, and I feel AI is there to make services more personalized. It's a personalized medicine, personalized education, personalized experience.
You talked there and you touched on the fact, how the pandemic was affected, but what came with that across all industries, I think, was the acceleration of wanting knowledge. How has the AI industry accelerated, and can we keep up with it? Mike?
So I think right now we're in an era of AI that supports two things. It's profound automation and decision support. So the virtue of the way AI works, look at it, very, very large data sets, and either taking the burden of that analysis away or finding new things within the data is sort of where we are now. I think the next phase is maybe the machine can make that decision for you. And that opens an entirely new set of decisions and considerations now that humans begin to give up agency on decisions, right? And so if the machine is already determining superior outcomes and can deliver on those outcomes, what comes next is maybe an interesting thing to debate.
What comes next? You're asking your own questions now.
Well, look, roles change, but also, human consideration of AI changes, right? The outcome or the derivation of a data set by a machine might be different than a human's conclusion over something. Ethics built into AI, guardrails put into AI become real considerations in a world where a machine is performing at a superior level to a human in many cases.
Bringing it back to a business perspective, how can CEOs, and maybe this one for you, Antonio, how can CEOs and policymakers ensure an ethical AI?
It's another question. It's another question because I'm a scientist, so I don't want to limit the power of AI. Okay, but I can understand this problem. I can understand what say a potential CEO asked me, and probably I have to limit something in the rules of the structure of the algo structure. I think to create a bridge, CEO and the scientist, and work together for a new paradigm, for a new approach, because we are publishing a paper, etc. CEO talks AI with in a narrative way, the robots. We will take out, etc., etc. So I think we have to work together, and we work with different AI and with a partner. There is a quantum computing, and quantum mechanics, etc. So a new framework, a new mathematical framework, and AI, ethics, and the not.
Knocking on from that framework, though, Pascal, what intellectual, business, and policy frameworks will be required to thrive in a world impacted by widespread AI?
Again, a tough question. I think, obviously, if you're gonna talk about AI, and we touched on this in the beginning of the conversation, we also have to talk about the training data we use to, build and train such algorithms. And I think that's probably where, if I was in politics and I had, all the contextual knowledge that would be required to make such a decision, I think I would start looking at the training data and start to understand, what are things we can do on a policy level that will help ensure that the data is not biased, is not oversampled in a certain, set of population. Like we see that, I think, maybe you can talk more about this in credit scoring already, famous example, where essentially the postal code of the address of a person was one of the key features to determine whether they are going to be creditworthy or not based on the machine learning algorithm, and that obviously was correlated with their, do they live in a, Western neighborhood or in a, ghetto neighborhood, and those types of things. I think we need to be really, really careful with to understand that now we're operating on a very, very high dimensional level where there's a lot of data and a lot of correlations that are taken into account that we sometimes, just as like with our limited capacity in our human brains, we just cannot understand them. So we have to build the tools to make sure that at the data level that we use to build the algorithms, that we can correct for such biases and such oversampling to make sure that like the resulting algorithms are going to be, at least somewhat fair. And if they're unfair, we have to understand in which way they are unfair so we can correct for it, again, in the human-machine collaboration idea. Yeah, that's probably where I would start. I would be very careful with trying to limit the use of AI because I think at the end of the day, even if you look at self-driving cars, we have to measure with similar measuring sticks. Like when we demand a self-driving car to be 100% accident-free, it's kind of unfair because humans are not 100% accident-free. And I would rather have a 99.95% accident-free car than maybe, might be a bad example here, but like maybe a drunk driver who speeds with 150 miles an hour, which obviously they're going to be more dangerous than the 99.95% correct algorithm. So I think that's also something that as policymakers we should be careful to not limit the use of algorithms too much, where they can probably already be useful today, but we don't use them.
Well, we're joined on the stage, late, but better late than never, with Bruno Messonnier, founder and CEO of Another Brain. You would think there would be some kind of AI technology to help you find your way around Saudi Arabia, yeah?
Sorry for being late. I had a token.
Don't worry, it's so big. You need Google Maps in here, but welcome to the stage. Thank you so much for joining us. Bruno, actually, good timing, because we've just been talking there about principles and policies. And I wondered whether you think there needs to be, I guess, a global governance of AI as an offshoot of that. Is that difficult because people adopt it regionally very differently?
Okay. When everyone is on the same line, that means there is no value added. So some has to disagree. So I disagree with this statement. Not only for the game. I think there are risks with AI as well as there are risks with every new technology. It's something that is happening all over the humankind history. We brought fire and people died from fire. We brought power, we brought nuclear. So it happened. And each time we have the same reaction. First, fear. And then we say, okay, let's forget about it. We want the second phase. And the third phase is humankind is very good at putting the feedback, at learning from that, at putting the rules and the constraints that will make that we will get the positive out of these new technologies, new possibilities, and minimize the negative part. The same will come with AI. I will come to that in 1 minute. But just before, the main question for me is, when do we have to have this governance? When do we have to have these rules? And think about that. If we had put current rules on aviation planes in the early 20s, we never would have plane industry. If we had put rules on cars in 90 or something, we never would have car industry. So the question is, we need to put rules, but first we need to accept the Darwinian exploration of the different possibilities and to accept people to explore, to try. And they will try good things, they will try bad things, and then afterwards we will control and we will put rules. So I'm always afraid, so this is my answer, about rules and global governance that are put on something from just a general thinking and just from the experience. And it's something we are very good at. So I'm from France, I'm from Europe, and in Europe there is something strange. We are very good at ethics. We are having a lot of ethics committees. But AI engines are done by American or Chinese. So that means it's like if we're trying as a water skier to orientate the boats So instead of doing that, let's create our boats. Putting rules to orient the boat, but somebody else is driving the boat doesn't make any sense. So that, for me, there is a question, let's accept exploration. Exploration is bringing some risks, yes, but we have to be very reactive and then to control that. So it would be my answer.
You know, moving again on from that, what are the greatest challenges, I guess, and Dr. Majid, maybe you can answer, what are the greatest challenges in the development of AI, but then the integration of it?
I think we have to worry about, I think countries have to worry about the data bias. Now, the advancement of AI is happening in the US, in China, and some parts of Europe. And when we try to adapt those algorithms and try to use them on local data, I think accuracy becomes a major issue. So I think we have to be very conscious about the different types of data, the localization of data, the bias of data. Bias can be against colors, bias can be against race, so we have to worry about that. Our gene map in Saudi Arabia is completely different than the US and Europe. And if we think that the same medication that applies to Saudi is the same medication applies to another country, I think we are missing the point. So this is where AI can help us to really, again, find solution. I tend to agree that there is a need for regulatory bodies to govern the use, to ensure that the use is also responsible use, without really affecting the research, and because I think it's very important also not to contain the thinking of researchers to extend the limit for AI and data. But I believe also within organizations we have to make sure that there is always a fit for purpose. So there is purpose for using AI, and AI is not going to be used for the sake of using AI, but if it is used to solve a problem or make us more efficient or reduce capacity. We have done, for example, a very nice project for breast cancer, and we are in the month of breast cancer, and with one of the charity organizations where it used to take almost 6 months for a mammogram to be read by a doctor due to capacity, and this is voluntary job. With AI, you can do that in 1 minute. At least you can screen the cases that needs to be seen by a doctor and put them on an accelerator track and leave something else that can take 6 months. This is the beauty of AI. This is where we can make things faster, better, more efficient. But we have to be conscious that localization of AI is important. And this is where democratization of AI becomes an issue, because Africa and other countries are not advancing in this field, and they will be left over. So I think we have to look for really bringing everybody together.
How do we do that? You know, this inclusiveness. And I think over the last 18 months to 2 years, it's become very clear that the world genuinely is a smaller place. You know, how do we bring them on board with us?
Fully agree. And I think it's all triggered by data. I mean, researchers in the West, if they know that there is a rare disease in Saudi Arabia that they cannot find data in Europe, they will come and collaborate. And similarly, I think we have to look for things that connect us, and because now we are thinking more as competition, who's gonna win this race, and I think we are missing a lot by doing that. I think here in Saudi Arabia, we started the AI Global Summit. We tried to bring people together. We also organized a UN meeting just to bring also African countries to the picture. So every country has to do their part, and I think international bodies will play a major role.
Bruno?
I fully agree with part of what has been said, but the part is a question of time frame. What we are doing, all of us today, in speaking about or doing artificial intelligence, is something that has no intelligence at all. It's statistics, let's say, another way of doing statistic categorization. And then, yes, my esteemed colleague is absolutely right. The question of bias in the data is key. And when we speak about color, let's say it's easy to discover, but there are other biases much more hidden, very difficult to discover. So yes, he's absolutely right. Now, my question is, we need another way of doing artificial intelligence. We need really intelligent AI. And we begin to know how. For me, the time frame is it will begin in 20 and 22, and the year after. That means it's right now. We begin to know how to do really intelligent AI working more or less like our brains. And you know what? Our brains is not needing hundreds of millions of data to make decisions. When you look at a movie, you have an alien, you don't know how it looks like. The first time you are surprised, but the second time you recognize it. So our brain is able to learn immediately. And very frugal in energy, what is not the case of deep learning AI. So that means, yes, this problem of bias on data is absolutely key. They have to be localized in the current way of doing AI. But there is another way of doing AI, and in my view, this other way is coming very soon. And small companies, small countries, or left behind countries in terms of technology are able to overpass the giants, because it's no more a question of thousands of PhDs or billions of dollars. It's a question of another kind of mindset, and it's a question of doing other way around. So here it's a question of idea, and I'm deeply convinced that the winner, cards will be shaken. The winner of tomorrow, when I say tomorrow, it will be in 2-3 years' time, it's not in 10 years' time, may come from whichever country around the world. It's not a question of PhDs and a top-down mindset. On the opposite, we want a bottom-up mindset, which is totally different.
I mean, Pascal, I'd like to bring you in here. How do we conceptualize and create intelligence then? How do we make it?
That's a tough question. I think it's the holy grail of AI right now. Is to, I mean,
and you have the answer.
I don't. I don't think I do, but I think there's a lot of very promising approaches. And one thing that we are particularly spending time with is this idea of neurosymbolic machine learning. So there's a almost forgotten field in machine learning where people try to essentially symbolize, if you will, the world, and then you try to learn the relationships between symbols, and then, great advances like, the famous IBM Watson example and so on came out of this field that required a lot of human input, a lot of manual work, if you will, to define these relationships and so on. And then on the other side, in the recent years, we have this end-to-end trained machine learning approaches, namely deep learning and other techniques, where you essentially don't require any human input at all. And you just give it, millions or hundreds of thousands of examples of something, which totally on board with what Bruno said, that, that's clearly not how we learn as humans. But there's something in the middle where you're trying to essentially learn relationships between concrete objects or things that you represent from the real world, and you learn these relationships not necessarily through programming, so human input, but you learn them through then end-to-end deep learning. And the combination of those has already shown very promising results where you can solve pretty complex cognitive tasks with relatively small amounts of training data. Example in computer vision, for example, there's already out there open sourced algorithms where you show it a handful, say 2 to 5, maybe 10 examples of a completely new object that the algorithm has never seen before, and now we can distinctly recognize that object with a fairly high accuracy. So that behavior then becomes more comparable with what we know from the example Bruno described of how we humans learn. Yeah. So I think there are already promising examples. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do, and I completely agree that most of the resources that we see today being poured in the field are still, unfortunately, being poured into this pure field of deep learning. Billions of dollars in computing power. Most of the research being published today is, I think, 95-ish% on this deep learning field, and very incremental changes to that. But the problem there is obviously that works so well right now that it's almost like a dilemma where it still works too well not to keep funding it, and it still solves a lot of problems extremely well, which is why obviously big companies are funding it. And then on the other side, it's more of a niche field right now with this neurosymbolic approaches and some other ideas that are currently being explored. But
maybe just building on the point, right? It feels like the way forward in many ways for AI is increasingly human. So the challenge is historically with AI, it's a black box, right? It's not explainable. And there are a number of other factors. It doesn't think the way that a human does, even though we do model a lot of it. We have neural nets, we have transformers, we have other techniques that we apply. But the state of the art is moving very quickly towards emulating more of what neuroscience does in our own brains. When we talk about sparse networks, right? When we talk about dendrite theory and applying that to the way that we develop our algorithms, we're actually building more along the lines of a brain than a machine over time. And I think when you start doing that, we start emulating more of people, and that might be the way to intelligence.
I think, like, sorry to jump in, but a more philosophical question here, but a lot of people always try to build machines that work like humans. We already have more than 7 billion humans on this planet. It's like, why would we build more of them? I think most of machine learning we see today is being used to solve very, very specific problems, and there's obviously this famous example of like a watch, you know, like a human is a pretty bad machine for telling time. Like, I have no idea how, I mean, unless I look at the watch in the background, I have no idea how long we've been sitting here, but watches are extremely good at it. And there's a lot of very small problems that we can already solve with the existing techniques. Why would we spend time creating another, like, human-like algorithm that just works, you know, the same way? Yeah, then it's like we already have, you know, again, 7 billion plus humans that want to do work, need to do work, and so on. So I think it's a quite philosophical question, like, do we actually need to build machines that work like a brain do? But
so what is the end goal then?
It's a tough question. I think depends on every individual. There's some people who are driven by curiosity to try to replicate how the brain works, largely, I think, in order to understand how the brain works with, you know, huge projects like the Blue Brain Project and so on. And then on the other side, there's more pragmatic, mostly driven by the large companies, more pragmatic approaches where you have a very specific problem to solve, like, what movie do I recommend the person next, like, you know, that type of stuff. So yeah, I think the end goal depends on who the actor is. Personally, for me, my end goal is really to understand how we can make people more effective at what they're doing by providing them tools that don't have to work like our brains do, but I think work in the exact orthogonal way where they're really good at the things that we are not good at, and they don't need to be good at the things that we're good at. So if you combine those two, you have a pretty powerful machine.
Well, Michael, you touched on the neuroscience of it, and obviously, you know, we are the ones ultimately that are creating this technology. You know, what more needs to be learned from and developed by studying neuroscience to shape the future of AI?
You know, I think the understanding of the brain is reflected actually in the implementation in AI presently. And the short of it is we don't fully understand cognition. We don't fully understand the neuroscience behind how we get to decisions. And frankly, the things we implement, and it's no surprise, reflect that. Right? But it highlights the importance of continuing to learn more about how we work and looking for inspiration in places like us and in nature for building that into technology in the future.
Yeah, we don't know how it works, our brain, so it's difficult to study and simulate the brain. And I think you are agree with me.
Bruno?
We don't know how it works. We don't know everything. Of course, there are a lot of things we don't know, but we know things. We don't know nothing. There are things we know, and for me, what we have is good enough to create the basis. And I will give you some examples, maybe out of that. But it's very important to understand that what everyone is doing, machine learning, deep learning, AI, and so on and so forth, it came from kind of a discrepancy, a discussion in the early 80s between people saying, wow, we have super powerful computers, algorithm, how to try and understand the messiness of the brain to create AI. That means if we want to fly planes, we are not mimicking the birds. So let's go our way. And this created all the computer science of today and AI of today. But the question is, it got some limits. And you know what? 5 years ago, we all heard about autonomous vehicle. It was the main themes. Everyone was speaking about autonomous vehicle. And now, nobody more. Why? Because the fundamentals of AI is that you have to feed the system with all the situations it will encounter during its life. So you have to feed for an autonomous vehicle your car with 100% of the situations the car will be confronted to during its life, which is impossible. So when people understood that, then they say, wow, So we have to invent a new way of doing artificial intelligence. So it will take 30 years. So that's why even Chris Urmson, the CEO of Google Cars, said, okay, autonomous vehicle now, it's not for now, it's in 30 to 50 years. But the real question behind it, we had to invent a new AI. But fortunately, I agree with all you said in terms of constraints, in terms of interest. We have references. I'm sorry, we have the human brain, okay, but we have mammal's brain, we have bird's brain, and we have social bugs. And I will give you some hints from social bugs, because people don't think that we can learn from honeybees, but we can. If you take honeybees, you take a hive of honeybees, end of winter, they are crowded because they produce new eggs and new bees. So 10,000 of them decide to leave and to create a new hive. And they have to choose the best place to create a new hive. That means finding the places and comparing the places. So it's a very complex cognitive challenge. None of the honeybee is able to make decisions and to make a comparison. They don't have brain for that. So how are they doing? They are all loaded with very elementary behaviors, and all of them all have the same behaviors. And here you see the power of the emergent process. That means the result, which is a high-level cognitive task, is coming from a combination of 10,000 of honeybees doing the very same thing with the same, but it making emerging this result. The same that termites, even more primitive bugs than honeybees. They are able, these small termites, to create termite mounds that are air-conditioned without any power. It can be up to 12 degree difference between outside. So 40 degrees outside, 28 inside without energy. Wow. Speed of the air is controlled internally. Humidity is controlled. But it's not controlled in an average rate. No, there are rooms with higher humidity because they are growing fungus they are eating, and there are other rooms with lower humidity rates because it's where they are nesting. So that means the power of emergence is great, and nature is very good at that. And you know what? If we look at the brain, the cortex, the neocortex, we have the same elementary structures equivalent to termites or honeybees. We have cortical columns, 110 neurons connected together. We don't know which kind of neurons, we don't know how they are connected. What we know is this very same structure is repeated 150 million times all over the cortex. So the brain is working like a multi-agent system. It's working the same way.
It's like swarm intelligence.
Sorry? Yes,
swarm
exactly.
Yes.
So that means collective, swarm, different. Yeah. But it's emerging. It's emerging intelligence. So we know things. And there are hundreds of scientific publications about different aspects of the brain. Of course, even Nobel Prizes. But of course, it's difficult because they are lost among millions of publications around deep learning, machine learning, reinforcement learning, whatever. So you have to have a guideline. You have to know what you're looking for. But we have the basis for that.
I think there's just such a vast, like you say, it's so big and everything is coming at us so quickly. If we bring it back down to a business level, and this one for you, Michael, how important is all of this to a business transformation?
Well, from the perspective of BNY Mellon and with colleagues in financial services, AI is essential and can add value to virtually any part of what we do, whether it be trade management, whether it be interactions with clients, whether it be risk management. There are very few places that we wouldn't do better for the benefit of, if you like, an electronic colleague that never forgets, can look at massive bits of data, can draw very interesting insights and conclusions, and do it faster than a human can. Right? You think of that as some of the benefits, naive benefits that an AI or an ML can provide. That helps us with investment research. That helps us automate just about anything that a person is doing in the operations space. That helps us look for fraud and intelligent in different ways, or not even intelligent ways. Just the fact that I know what normal looks like in a computer's mind, and it can find something different. That's a profoundly different approach to the way business has been conducted in financial services historically. And so that's really what's exciting and interesting and appetizing about really applying this in as many places as we can.
How big a threat is cybersecurity to the AI industry?
So I'll start, and I'm sure there are other opinions.
I'm sure
right?
everyone's
But, look, what we're finding, right, is not ironically, the cyber defense on AI is more AI.
Yeah.
When you look at smart cities, Las Vegas in the U.S. has arguably a very smart city with a lot of planning and algorithms running the show. Cyber defense and cyber attacks have been, it feels very vogue on a global basis lately. They're protecting themselves with AI. They're looking for unusual anomalous events, and the AI is directing the response, right? So the agency of the response is actually being handed off to technology as well as finding
Policing
issues.
itself.
Yes.
Bruno, I'm sure you've got something to add into this.
I'm not expert in that, so I'm just thinking with my a good sense, let's say. For me, a real AI, a really intelligent AI, is something that will help us discovering new patterns, discovering new tactical schemes in situations. And the others who will make attacks, so either for real defense we need or for virtual defense or whatever, the other knows which kind of technology you have. It knows which kind of artificial intelligence you have. So they will build their attacks based on that. So that means you absolutely need to have a system for your defense that is not working the same way and that is learning by itself. When you have satellites, they are very, let's say, alone over there. And when you have satellites attacking them, well, they need to be able to react by their own to a situation that is unknown, each time different, and so on. So for me, we really need real AI in order to do that. But with the same AI as everybody, you are on the opposite, exposing yourself.
Dr. Majid, do you think there will ever come a point when the AI technology becomes too clever?
Yes, I think so, but not more clever than human. I think it's at the end, it's created by human. These technologies we are talking about today, it's been there for many years. I did my PhD in the 90s, early 90s, using neural networks. Same technology applies today. What differs is data and more powerful machines. And the usage, the innovation that is brought by human that say, wow, this is a great tool that I can use in healthcare, I can use in smart city. When we invented cars, the cities look different than before cars and after cars. And I think cities will be different before AI and after AI. And this is where Saudi Arabia invented NEOM, because we believe cities of the future will be different with these technologies, with AI and helping in the traffic control, public safety. Cars might be different. The areas of drones might be different. So I think, yes, there will be smarter AI and technologies. And I'm not sure how our kids would react to that. So there is this age divide that we have to worry about. I'm in an age that I'm also limited in my thinking capacity to what AI can bring to life. But if I speak to my kid who's playing maybe hours a day on games that uses AI, might have a different thinking. So I wouldn't be surprised in the future where our kids each creating its own copy of himself as an avatar, working with him day and night, be trained by him. By the time it gets old, it's another copy of him. So that's what worries me, is we become not too human. And that's really us not using the technology in the right way.
We talked earlier a bit about big data, and the collection of data, can become a big issue, especially when it comes to privacy and data laws. And I know 2 data laws have just been passed here in the kingdom. How important is it to safeguard information that the AI technology?
I think it's very important. The fact that, if I ask anyone to give me his or her ID, they will be reluctant. But we are giving our data just when you log into the internet, you're just giving away yourself, your personality, your interest, what you like to shop for, what you like to watch for. All of this is given for free. And companies are using that to create these big algorithms to know who we are so that they will direct marketing back to us. So I think this area of protecting our data is very important. And this is Again, unfortunately, this is really controlled by big companies in the world, and that's the worry of AI. The worry is the companies that are controlling AI, that is using the data of people to really, for their interest. So that's really very important. This is why Saudi Arabia has come up with policy for data protection, the same way we came up with policy for open data and for data sharing. So we don't want to prevent research and innovation, but at the same time, we want to do it in a responsible way.
Pascal, what would you say has been, what is the most immediate challenge for the industry?
Which industry? I mean,
the AI industry.
I think, I couldn't think of like one single one, but I think there's a multitude of them. I think first of all is this what was touched upon, the how do you deal with data responsibly in a way that you don't limit research, but at the same time don't intrude privacy too much, and what's the trade-off there? I think this divide of where do we spend our time and energy in terms of research, what approaches, again, we talked about neurosymbolic, emergent machine learning approaches versus deep learning and so on. I think that's a big challenge right now where, we're running with like full speed against, probably a concrete wall with deep learning, and right now it's still fun to run in that direction, but at some point it might not be anymore. So I think doing that trade-off is going to be important. And then also this whole idea of human-machine interaction, like how are we going to make sure that we don't fully replace ourselves, we don't, we use it as, as it was designed originally as a tool to make ourselves more effective and better at what we're doing. I think those are the major challenges. There's obviously a lot more interesting stuff in terms of, how can we talked about security before. One thing that, something that I spend a bunch of time on is this idea of how can machine learning algorithms be hacked. So now you're relying on, for example, computer vision for self-driving cars, and those computer vision algorithms, they're recognizing very minute patterns for something that, in the end turns out to be, say, a stop sign or a person, and you can essentially put like a filter, if you will, in front of the camera or the system that inputs the images, so that for a human it still looks like, say, a stop sign, but for a machine it can now look like a green traffic light. And those types of adversarial attacks is something that can become pretty dangerous for the whole field of machine learning. Computer vision is just one example, but I think that's going to be really interesting to follow and see if we can come up with good policies to prevent it, and also algorithms to identify and counteract such attacks.
Bruno, I think you have something to add into that discussion.
Yeah, for the AI industry, during this phase where deep learning is driving AI, and it will happen for some years, for me there is a problem that we have to face, is that usually you don't have data, you don't have big data. That means when you have big data, you have a lot of challenges, a lot of problems of secrecy, privacy, or whatever, and bias, whatever. But in the majority of the cases, you don't have the data. I will give you an example. We are working in my company with industry doing inspection. At the end of a production line, you want to control whether the product is correct or not. But industrial manufacturers want to improve, but they are not totally bad. So that means today they have a problem every 100,000 parts, and they want to go to 1 per million. Okay, great, but one problem per 100,000 parts, you never will have thousands of problems registered as data to be able to run your deep learning AI. That means the problem is you don't have the data. When you will have 1,000 or 10,000 of your examples of defaults, your production batch will be over. And in the majority of the cases, the situation is we don't have the data. If you want to go to look for extrasolar planets running around other stars, if you want to go even for things like radiology on prostheses, somebody that has a hip prosthesis or knee prosthesis, you want to use AI to automatically learn and help radiology, you don't have the databases. That means in majority of real cases, you don't have the big data in order to do that. So this is something we have to deal with.
There seems to be, there is infinite potentials on how we use AI, and it was something I said to Pascal earlier about, what is the end game? You weren't here for that, but what are your thoughts on that? The end game of AI, where is it going? Where does it end?
Well, there are so many things to say here. For me, every sector of humanity, of what we are doing, will be boosted by AI. And I will take some examples at the big level. Environment. Everybody knows for 20 years that we are going for huge problems. Everybody knows for 20 years. Even President of the United States, previous one or the other, they knew. But the question, we are not going fast enough. Why? Because it's tough, it's very difficult. Because you have to take into account so many constraints, so many things, people, wealthiness, and whatever. So it's very complex. So for me, we need additional intelligence to help solving this question. But it's the same with something that touched me because I have a daughter. Well, okay, it's a genetic engineering to solve diseases. That means we speak about that for 50 years, the same. But it's not yet there. Okay, we've made some steps. We are moving ahead. Great, perfect. But it's not yet there. It's so tough, difficult. So for me, there are huge problems of humankind that we will be able to solve, help with additional artificial intelligence, but real intelligence. So for me, it will touch every area of humankind. And you know what? One day, if we even will meet aliens, I'm sure one day we will meet aliens, but you know what? They won't live at the same frequencies as us. Maybe they will speak and talk and behave at 10 kilohertz, so you won't even see them. Or on the opposite, they will take 2 years to make a sentence in the space. Or they will live in other frequencies, you cannot see them, they are in the UV. So we will meet aliens. I'm sure artificial intelligence will be the only way to help humankind to deal with that positively. So there are so many things. The space business, digging meteorites to produce cleanly rare metals or to produce cleanly different things will be great, but we will need AI for that. So it will transform humankind.
Michael, what do you think is the biggest thing we've learned so far moving forwards?
I think from the perspective of what AI can do relative to maybe a number of the waves of technology we've seen, is this one is truly unbounded, right? So anytime we seem to have hit a limitation in what we thought an algorithm can do, someone finds a way, and we break through and we're able to do more. We're able to do more, and as was described, with less data, more intelligently, faster. And it's geometric at this point. And so that's, I can't think of many technology analogs that have produced maybe that profound a change or has the potential to produce the profound change. And you don't use the word too often, except maybe at conferences like this, to humanity, than what AI has been able to accomplish across virtually every industry.
How do we convince those who are reluctant to embrace it that this is the way forward?
That's a tough question. Look, I think it starts with experience, right? So people are experiencing AI every single day to improve their lives, right? It starts with autocorrect on the iPhone, right? It starts with that excellent match on a dating app or something else. You're experiencing it day to day, and you're actually using it. You don't know you're using it. And now the use cases are going to expand. I mean, how many of us have said, "Hey Siri," or "Okay Google," or pick your permutation, right? We're training people to become more familiar with AI, and we're training them to be more comfortable with the results, and I think that's how it starts, right? It'll be bit by bit, and we'll all be users of AI in a big way in the future.
Even more so.
Yeah, I think you're right, it's a tough question, but it's a question through which humankind passed several times. Humankind is very good at discovering new technologies. Each time people are reacting by fear. Let's think about steam, let's think about nuclear power, let's think about electricity. People are fearing what's going to happen with that. Each time humankind has been able to close the loop and to put feedback loops and to take the good part of this technology avoiding, reducing the dramatic negative part effect. Look at the fire. How many people in human history that died from fire? But now we know how to deal with that, and we take the good part and not the bad. So it's something humankind is very good at. It will happen with AI, it will happen with robotics, it will happen with genetic engineering. We will have problems, we will have bad parts, and we will have good parts, and we will learn how to deal with, and it will be only much more for the good than for the bad. I don't know how we will do that, but it's something humankind is very good at.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for a wonderful session this morning. Dr. Majid, Antonio, Bruno, Pascal, and Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marjorie Krause. I'm the founder and executive chair of APCO Worldwide, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel. So we have a very short amount of time to talk about a very interesting topic, and I'd like to introduce our two distinguished guests. So we have Manfredi Lefebvre, who's the executive chairman of Silver Seas Cruise Line, and many other attributes in his long and illustrious career in the tourism industry. And then we have Fawaz Faruqi, sorry Fawaz, I know that, who's the managing director of Cruise Saudi. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the cruise industry, and particularly about Cruise Saudi, and the bold initiative that's happening in the kingdom. So Fawaz, if we start with you, it's unimaginable that somebody could stand up and take such a bold initiative at the time of COVID to start a cruise line, when cruise was in the news every day for being the place you don't go. What gave you the will to do this? How did you do that?
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that it also came as a surprise to us. Our initial plan was to launch cruising and receive the first cruise passenger in 2024, maybe end of 2023. As many of you know, the cruise industry plans well ahead 2 to 3 years in advance their destinations. So for us, it was by 2023, we might build our cruise terminal, and then we bring the first cruise passenger. What happened is the pandemic hit, the cruise lines the cruise operations came to a complete halt, and we saw multiple cases where people were stranded on the ships in Japan, and they kind of effectively became, like Manfredi likes to call them, jail. And meanwhile, what was happening in Saudi in May of 2021, we were getting ready to open domestic tourism, and the number of cases were very low, relatively, and we needed an interesting product for our domestic market. So we talked to our partners. Here, there's Manfredi, there's also the CEO of Silver Sea, Roberto, sitting there. So we worked together to bring Silver Sea to Saudi Arabia. And at that time, there were three very important things that we wanted to take into account. Number one, we wanted to make sure that the passengers, when they come on board, they never end up with that situation that happened in Japan and other places. Number two, their health, and making sure that we don't tolerate or take any risk when it comes to their health or the outbreak. Number three, and this was also very important, since we were opening cruising for the first time in Saudi, that they have an enjoyable experience. And we had a great ER plan. And let me tell you this, as you know, many ER plans never get activated. But in our case, on the first cruise, and I think Roberto remembers this very well, we had a suspected case in the first sailing. And we dealt with it as we planned for it. So we brought the ship back one day ahead of time. We informed the passengers that, you need to stay in your rooms and we're coming back, because transparency is very important. And within 3 to 4 hours, everybody on the ship got disembarked and they went home. So that's how we started this industry.
Fantastic story. What was the reaction to the cruise? What was accomplished? And then I'd like to come back to you about a little bit about this partnership and how it works. So
far, if you talk about what we have accomplished so far, so last year we had 4,100 passengers, and all of them were domestic. This year, so far, we've accomplished more than 20,000 passengers, 5 times more than we achieved last year. Last year, we activated 2 new destinations. This year, we have 6 new destinations that we've activated. 2 of them are islands. We have also started global cruising. We went to Egypt and Jordan. We also, this year, completed our main home port in Jeddah. And then the second home port in Dammam will be completed by the end of November, and we'll start receiving passengers by December. So that's when it comes to ports. Human capital development is very, very important. As you can see here, it's investing in humanity.
And I understand you did some really novel and interesting things on human capital.
Yeah, so we had 3 key programs. Number 1 is with the Culinary Commission of the Ministry of Culture, where we created amazing programs with MSc chefs. So when you go on board MSc chef, and I was there on the weekend, I opened the menu and I find kapsa on the menu. So this was done by Saudi chefs going on board MSc and training them. We did the same with Silver Sea last year. Number 2, we just launched a tour guides program to train 140 tourist guides in different regions of the kingdom with the Ministry of Tourism. Number 3, and it's also very important, we created an internship program for Saudi college students who now completed 3 months aboard MSc ship. 12 of them are females, and I was proud to be on board and see them working hand in hand with the captain and with the rest of the staff. And it was a moment of pride for me when I saw a Saudi female lady, I think she was 18 or 19 years old, and she was making an announcement alongside the captain of the ship to inform the ship passengers on the status of the ship.
I'm sure you had an abundance of students interested, so it's great to create all these new jobs for these young, enthusiastic students. So in a minute, we can talk about where this is going, but Manfredi, I'd love to talk to you about how did you two meet, and what made you get interested in what Fawaz was doing?
Well, at the beginning of my life, I used to come to Saudi Arabia to do business because my father had business here. So that is when I was 21, 22, 23, 24. So I always kept a lot of passion for this country. And one day I'm in London, and common friend of mine, and Fawad says, "Oh, let's have lunch together." So we had lunch together, and we hit it. We became a very nice relationship, I think, at least on my side. And so we talked about their desire. And it was already in the moment in which the world has gone into a halt. So, you could say, this country has not done cruising. The Red Sea is not a destination for cruising. The Saudis are not a traditional market for cruising. Everybody's afraid of touching the subject about putting people on. But Fawad had a lot of courage. He went ahead. Of course, he could have the support of Silversea team, which was particularly skilled at operations, because Roberto, the CEO of Silversea Cruises, who was with me when I was very young in military college, we went together, is not only the CEO, but he's an operations guy, so very capable on that side. And together, they managed not only to negotiate a contract, but to operate. And if you think about it, it's a first of many things. It's the first time there's a dedicated cruise in the Red Sea. It's the first time that it is a cruise being promoted amongst the Saudi as a local vacation, but with a character which is international. And it's the first time when there's been an operation of a cruise ship under COVID times. So really, they proved that it could happen. And they did it in a seamless way. All the people were very happy, only good comments about it, and no problem. Of course, Fawad took a risk. It could have been not mishandled, and it would have been a problem. But instead, it was a great success, which I think proved many things. You can cruise, even if there is as a safe haven from local problems, from disease, etc. Red Sea is a great destination, and the Saudi population likes it. I think that.
No, definitely. I think what he mentioned is important, but I'm just the one tiny player. There is a will by the leadership of this country, as you've seen so far. They always want the best, and their ambitions are sky high. So, I was just a tiny, small part, but how the whole leadership of the country, the government, the private sector collaborated to make this happen was key.
Well, it was a big risk to do this, and, it sounds like it was a fantastic experience for everybody involved. What have you learned from partnering with such an experienced person? And then we don't have a lot of time, but let's turn to where all this can go, where it can lead.
So number one is you cannot compromise on the health and safety of the passengers. That is very, very important, because if you're not clear or if you're not direct on that, it will come back and hit you. So you have to be very diligent on that. Number two, transparency with the passengers. You have to be transparent with them. You have to, if you don't know, you have to go out and tell them you don't know, and you have to be because nowadays they will know one way or another with this ubiquitous media. They will know one way or another. So it's important, and when they feel respected, they'll come back to you. Number three, there's nothing called impossible if you really do the right thing and have the right resources and partners, and go to the people who know it all. So it's important. Now, looking at the future, we are planning now to receive 1 million passengers by 2028. We will create 50,000 direct and indirect jobs by 2035. We will operate 5 cruise ports in Saudi Arabia by 2025. And more importantly, we'll focus a lot on creating and activating destinations and excursions. This country has an amazing culture, has an amazing coastline, and we want to make sure that people, and especially cruise passengers, get to experience and try these amazing cultural sites and the warm hospitality at its best.
And how do you think this fits into the future of the cruise industry, the Saudi effort here, and the big ambitious plans?
Well, I think that in general, travel and tourism has the same hurdles to pass, which is uncertainty of legislation when you go to a destination, when you come back. The cruise industry is particularly well suited to cater with this, because it is in one way a pre-packaged vacation. So the cruise line takes care of everything for you. It tells you, we will take you here, you will embark from there on for 10 days, 7 days, whatever. you're going to be handled by the cruise line, and then we'll take you back. So it's a very protected experience from departure to arrival. On top of that, it's one of the few opportunities to take a vacation where the entire environment can be protected. If you're in a hotel, the staff will go home. On a cruise ship, they stay on board. So it is very protected. So what at the beginning of the COVID experience became a prison, I'm in a cruise ship where there is COVID, I'm trapped in it, it's becoming now instead a very safe environment where to take a vacation. I think now my last act as a tenure as chairman of Silver Sea was the cruise with Fawaz, of which I'm particularly proud. After that, I left the chairmanship of Silver Sea. So I've not been, but I have another company which is called Abercrombie & Kent. But what the cruise lines are doing is really what we should try to do with all the vacations. We should always try to bring the people who are traveling with us in a safe way, and we have to take care of all the vacation from there. And that is going to be a main feature of the difference between a self-organized vacation and a vacation organized by a professional team of a big organization like my company is.
Well, that's one thing I've always loved about cruising is that, as somebody who's always been in charge of the family vacation, I love the idea it's really a vacation when somebody else has the responsibility for making it work and making you happy and picking, when you have professionals in charge. So I think this idea of packaged vacations, and especially what the cruise industry can do, is really great.
Don't get me started about the beauty of cruising.
I just want to know where I can sign up.
I started in cruising in '87. So what is it, 35 years ago? When we bought Sitmar Cruises. So that's been, my life. I'm very nostalgic about it, of course. But so the goods of cruising are so many, and depending what kind of product you're buying. Of course, in the luxury cruising, it's a melting pot of people. If you go in a hotel, you're not going to be stopping the people who are walking around. On a cruise ship, it's an experience you're doing together. So people feel that they are part of the same group, and they make friends. Lifelong friendships are made on a cruise ship. People from all over the world. You may be an American from Kansas City and have a friend from Rome, and you made them on a cruise ship because you're going to be dealing with each other. So it's a product which has a lot of qualities. Of course, experiential travel is another kind of traveling because you see the world in different ways. But, I could go hours talking about cruising.
And Fawaz, before we end this, since we only have a minute left, what if people are interested in learning more and being part of the future of Saudi Cruise or Cruise Saudi, what should they do?
They should go to reach out to us, Cruise Saudi. We are a one-stop shop for global cruise liners and also as well as passengers who want to come to Saudi Arabia. And I invite you and your family to have your next vacation on a cruise
immediately. But because I think that I think this discussion also shows the spirit of the country and willing to take risk and be out there and try things that may be counterintuitive to other people, and I commend you both for this effort. I have a really great opportunity to talk to you both, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, congratulations, Fawaz. You did a great job.
All of us. Thank you.